CNN, one of the worst offenders of propaganda against politically conservative Donald Trump and We the People as supporters of Trump's policies, is owned by Warner Media. This company has significant financial ties to China and has downplayed China's role in spreading the coronavirus, which killed people around the world, caused worldwide pandemic, and economic ruin. Did we say economic ruin? Yes. China wants to be the world's only superpower. So why not destroy the economies of the Western world to get there? It's a lot easier than trading nuclear strikes. And wouldn't that help propel their agenda? Another thought. CNN sang the praises of China and absolves them of the COVID-19 debacle. Then China's propagandists spread throughout China the story that U.S. companies do not blame the CCP for the virus. Is the picture getting clearer? Are the dots getting connected yet? MSNBC and NBC, two more members of the mainstream media, are owned by NBC Universal, another company with extensive financial ties to the Chinese Communist Party. These two propagandist/media giants constantly derided President Trump. When China connects itself with useful idiots in America by dangling out the financial carrot, they position themselves so they can carry out their agenda without having to invade our shores. A very risky proposition even in their eyes. Surely, I'm not the only one who can see the emperor's choice of clothing is suspect. Am I the only one who believes there needs to be some prosecuting of Chinese pawns in this country on the basis of their treasonous behavior? Let's continue. Speaking of Chinese pawns, as Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi used to decry Chinese aggression until her husband and son began to make money by doing business in and with China. She adamantly refused to bring any bill to the floor of the House that sought to investigate the origin of the COVID virus. Mitch McConnell, RKY, minority leader in the U.S. Senate, is married to Elaine Chao, a Chinese woman whose family owns a major shipping company and has for decades had ties to high-level people in the Chinese government. So, the Democrats have no monopoly on Chinese ties. ABC, the American broadcast company, has obvious ties to China through its shared ventures in Walt Disney and ESPN. Both of these companies see China as a huge market for their product. If China wasn't so rich, American companies wouldn't be drooling to get established with them. We mentioned that here too, as Jen Psaki often put it. Circle back to the previous point about America funding research in China for anything, especially virology. The influence China has with Disney is best demonstrated by the last edition of the animated film, Mulan. To maintain access to the Chinese market, films must be tailored to make China look good so as to make the CCP happy. Former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg is heavily invested in China, and he has helped finance Chinese companies with billions of dollars from U.S. investors sent to the Chinese bond market. After getting his delicate feelings hurt in the 2020 presidential campaign by losing to Trump, Michael Bloomberg became one of President Trump's biggest critics and demeaned him at every turn, especially during the Democrat National Convention, at which he called Trump a con and called on voters to elect a sane, competent person. Wow, check out the bitterness. Connect the Bloomberg, New York Times, and Chinese dots while you're at it. If you haven't figured out China's communist/atheist role in our politics, their effort to subvert our nation, and how they keep buying into American businesses and positioning themselves on the chessboard to influence our politicians and economy, especially in the 2020 election. Ask yourself why a tabulating machine for counting 2020 election votes in Savannah, Georgia was connected to a server in China. This was discovered during a forensic examination of the Georgia machine by a Microsoft engineer. Is controlling our election one piece of China's obsessive plan to displace America as the sole superpower? And does this fit into their multi-level plan to turn America into a secular socialist nation? Does this also fit into Satan's plan to get his one world government? Draw your own conclusions, and don't let CNN do it for you. Could it be that leftists know there is a God, the God of the Bible, and they are afraid he's going to reverse their trends and take priority over their progress of turning certain people into non-believers and or turning America into a godless, socialist nation in concert with an effort that goes back at least as far as 1958, when the Communist Plan for America was exposed in a book titled The Naked Communist. What's equally troubling about the left is that they push so hard for a system of government whose most basic tenets will deny them the right to own either businesses or land. And yet Bill Gates, a globalist and business owner, owns 268,984 acres of farmland. Because in a true Marxist-oriented country, socialist orthodoxy prevents private ownership of both. In Soviet-era Russia, a person who tried to start a business would have had to do it surreptitiously because it was a very risky proposition. A Russian citizen trying to do such a thing in the Soviet Union could be sent to prison just for starting a business. That's how serious and tyrannical a socialist government becomes. Considering the above, if Democrat socialists succeed in taking over this country or doing maximum damage while they capture control of the entire federal political machinery, or if they ever do it again, Barack Obama should wonder what will happen to his $12 million Massachusetts estate in Martha's Vineyard. Then there's Bernie Sanders, blatantly admitting his ties to socialism. So what happens to his $1.5 million worth of houses in multiple locations? Don't forget Nancy Pelosi, who owns $20 million worth of real estate. And wouldn't her husband's real estate business be in jeopardy of confiscation by the government under socialism? You've got to wonder what all of those people are thinking in pushing socialism and their ties to the Democrat Socialists of America, and think what they stand to lose. Karl Marx would demand that they share their houses, fortunes, and all their possessions with others in what he called a redistribution of wealth. That may sound good to people working for minimum wage who believe it will directly profit them when Mark Zuckerberg's, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, and Michael Bloomberg's billions get redistributed to the proletariat. Unfortunately, the socialism being taught to our younger generations, who have been brainwashed into thinking it is a fairer system, is seducing and deceiving them into supporting the move toward this unrealistic, insidious, and totally unfair system. Yes, unfair. In the October Revolution in 1917 Russia, true socialism was forced onto the Russian people. It was called a revolution, but in truth it was a civil war between those who wanted to impose Marxist socialism on others and take away their property and wealth to give it to somebody else. And that's where the SHTF people understandably rebelled against giving up what they'd worked for. In the end, those who owned houses were required to move out so others could live there, or they were forced to let others move in and take up residence in their homes, because it was determined that the owners were living too well and the new dwellers had a right to take up residence in their property. In other words, the government appropriated the private property, which would violate our Constitution. But the socialists hate the Constitution anyway, so it's a moot point. Having it cloaked in a warm, fuzzy phrase like redistribution of the wealth, socialism's true nature is belied. In other words, it's plain and simple government-sanctioned theft, not only of physical property, but of a standard of living, and it's not what anybody in the West would really call a fairer system if they knew what they were talking about. The Soviet socialist government also built high-rise apartment buildings and provided flats to those who could meet the government's qualifications for them. Others were housed in renovated warehouses that were turned into dwellings in which people would be assigned by the government to one room. Whole families in one room. That doesn't imply a one-bedroom apartment. No, it was one single room. These were called kommunalkas, communal living, which consisted of multiple one-room dwellings, not unlike a college dormitory. Up to, in some cases, 16 families lived in their government-provided one-room dwellings that had community-shared facilities. In other words, all of these families had their one room to live in, but had to share one kitchen and one bathroom for the whole lot of them. Imagine having to get ready for work or school in the morning when 16 families have to use the same bathroom and kitchen, especially under the threat of prison for being late to work. This also begs the question of what happened if the family expanded. Another aspect of the socialist life is something that would make pro-choice people and Planned Parenthood, big donor to the Democrats, very happy.